Stop being too reachable. She turned off her phone for the first time in 11 years on a Wednesday afternoon in March. Not because it was dead. Not because she was going into a meeting or boarding a flight or entering a situation where the turning off was required by external circumstance. She turned it off deliberately, intentionally, with the specific full awareness of what she was doing and what it would mean and what would happen in the absence of its presence. She placed it face down on the kitchen table. She watched the screen go dark. She sat with the specific quality of silence that followed. Her name was Diana. She was 38 years old. She had been, by her own later description, one of the most available people she knew. Available in the morning before the workday began. Available in the evening after it ended. Available on weekends, on holidays, during meals, during what were technically vacations but were actually the same workday conducted from more pleasant geographical locations. Available to messages and emails and requests and questions and the specific continuous demand of a world that had discovered, through the specific historical accident of the smartphone's invention, that the people in it could now be reached at any moment without the previous requirement of a telephone call that the recipient could choose to answer or not. She had not chosen. She had simply always answered. Not from obligation in any explicit sense. No one had required it. No policy had demanded it. No specific person had insisted. She had simply absorbed, gradually and completely and without ever making a conscious decision about it, the ambient cultural norm that had emerged in the decades since everyone became constantly reachable, the norm that being available was being responsible, that responding quickly was being professional, that the person who answered promptly was the person who took things seriously, and that the space between a message's arrival and its response should be as small as possible and preferably immediate. She had internalized this norm so completely that the 11 years of its maintenance had produced something she could not have anticipated when the first smartphone appeared in her hand. Something she had not been able to see clearly while she was inside it. The complete colonization of her interior life by the exterior world's continuous demand for her attention. Not because the demands were unreasonable. Individually, each of them was reasonable. Each message was from a real person with a real question or a real need or a real thought that genuinely warranted some form of response. Each interruption was connected to something that genuinely mattered to someone. But the aggregate, the specific, continuous, never quiet aggregate of being always reachable to everyone who knew how to reach you, had produced something that she had only begun to understand in the weeks before the Wednesday afternoon when she turned the phone off. The complete absence of a genuinely private interior. Not privacy in the sense of secrets. She had no particular secrets. In the sense of genuinely uncontested interior space. Of hours and sometimes days that belonged entirely to the direction of her own attention, the development of her own thoughts, the navigation of her own genuine concerns and her own genuine development without the continuous interruption of other people's claims on where her attention should be. She had been reading the Stoics. Seneca specifically, who had written with a directness about the relationship between genuine interior development and the management of external access that felt, across 2,000 years, like someone who had watched the specific pattern she was living and had understood exactly what it cost. Seneca had written about the person who is present everywhere and therefore present nowhere. About the mind that is continuously scattered across other people's demands and that therefore cannot gather itself into the sustained, deep, genuinely productive engagement with its own development that genuine wisdom requires. About the specific, daily, ongoing cost of being available to everyone at the expense of being available to yourself. She had read this 3 weeks before the Wednesday. She had thought about it for 3 weeks. She had continued answering every message immediately for 3 weeks while thinking about it. And then, on a Wednesday afternoon in March, she placed the phone face down on the kitchen table and watched the screen go dark. She sat in the silence for a long time. Not a comfortable silence. The specific, slightly alarming silence of a person who has removed something that had been functioning as a constant low-grade noise and who is now experiencing the specific quality of what the noise had been covering. Herself. Her actual, unmediated, genuinely present self. With her actual thoughts and her actual concerns and her actual relationship with the time she was inhabiting. Without the continuous management of other people's access to that time. She sat with it for 3 hours. When she turned the phone back on, 47 messages had arrived in her absence. None of them were emergencies. 2 were from people who had sent follow-up messages inquiring about why she had not responded to the first ones within the usual window. She read through them without responding to any of them. She made tea. She sat at the kitchen table for another 30 minutes with her thoughts. Then she began responding. Not immediately. From a considered position. From the genuine assessment of which ones deserved her genuine attention and which ones had been demanding attention that they had not genuinely deserved. This was different. In a way she could feel in her body. In the specific way that doing something from genuine choice rather than from the automatic accommodation of an ambient norm feels different from the inside. She had not solved anything permanent. The phone was back on. The messages would continue. The world's continuous demand for access had not been interrupted by 3 hours of self-imposed darkness. But something had changed that the 3 hours had made possible. She had had 3 hours of genuine uncontested interior space. And in those 3 hours, in the specific quality of what the silence had made available, she had understood something that 11 years of constant reachability had been preventing her from understanding. She had forgotten how to be with herself. Not in the dramatic, psychological sense of having lost touch with who she was. She knew who she was. She had opinions and values and a genuine interior life that was genuinely hers. But the capacity to be with that interior life, to inhabit it without the continuous mediation of external demand, to think her own thoughts to their genuine conclusions without interruption, to sit with her own genuine concerns with the specific quality of sustained attention that genuine self-development requires, this capacity had atrophied. Had been gradually, systematically, completely replaced by the continuous accommodation of the world's access. She had become too reachable. And the cost was not primarily to her productivity or her schedule or her professional performance. The cost was to herself. To the specific quality of the person she was capable of being when the interior had the uncontested space to develop that genuine development requires. This is what we are exploring today. Completely. With the philosophical depth, the practical honesty, and the full engagement with what being too reachable actually costs and what the alternative actually looks like and what the specific practices of reclaiming genuine interior space actually require. This is Stoic Ascension. Subscribe to this channel right now and turn on your notifications because every single video here is built for exactly this level of genuine philosophical depth and exactly this quality of practical engagement. The kind that names what most people are experiencing without knowing what to name it. What comes after this builds directly on everything you are about to hear. Do not miss what is coming. What being too reachable actually means, the philosophical precision that changes everything. Being too reachable is not primarily a scheduling problem. It is not primarily a time management issue or a productivity concern or the specific professional challenge of managing competing demands on your attention. It is a philosophical problem. A specific, consequential, philosophically precise problem about the location of the governance of your interior life and the degree to which that governance belongs to you versus to the external world's continuous demand for your attention. The person who is too reachable has, through the gradual, unexamined accommodation of ambient cultural norms about availability, allowed the external world to become the primary director of where their attention goes. Has ceded the most fundamental and most consequential resource they possess, the specific, finite, genuinely irreplaceable resource of their own attention, to whoever knows how to produce a notification on the device in their pocket. This session is not dramatic. It did not happen in a single moment of decision. It happened through the specific, gradual, completely unremarkable accumulation of small accommodations. The first time you checked your messages before getting out of bed. The first time you responded to a work message on a Sunday afternoon. The first time you interrupted a genuinely important conversation to respond to a notification that was not genuinely important. The first time you chose the immediate response over the sustained engagement with your own genuine thinking because the immediate response was what the ambient norm expected and the sustained engagement required the kind of uninterrupted space that the ambient norm had been systematically eliminating. Each of these small accommodations was individually trivial. Collectively, they produced the specific condition of permanent external governance of your interior attention. The Stoics identified this condition, not in the specific language of smartphones, obviously, but in the precise philosophical language of the mind that has surrendered its own direction, as among the most serious available threats to genuine human flourishing. Seneca wrote about it with the urgency of someone who understood that the interior life is the only genuine location of everything worth building. He described the person who is accessible to all visitors and who therefore belongs to no one, not even to themselves, as a specific philosophical failure. Not a failure of productivity. A failure of the most fundamental human responsibility, the responsibility to be the primary director of your own attention and the primary author of your own interior development. Epictetus located this responsibility in the doctrine of the dichotomy of control. What is yours? Your judgment, your intention, your attention, your chosen response. What is not yours? Everything external, including the demands that the external world makes on your attention and the frequency with which it makes them. The too reachable person has reversed this assignment. Has treated what is genuinely theirs, their attention, as a resource that belongs to anyone who knows how to request it. And has treated the external world's demand for that attention as if it were a genuine obligation rather than a request to which genuine choice can be applied. This reversal is the philosophical problem. And naming it precisely is the beginning of genuinely addressing it. What the Stoics understood about solitude, silence, and the interior life. The Stoic philosophical tradition was built around a specific understanding of the relationship between the quality of the interior life and the quality of everything else that a human being produces, contributes, and experiences. The interior life, the specific quality of the thinking, the judgment, the wisdom, the genuine insight that a person is capable of generating, is not a fixed resource that is simply present in the person and that can be expressed whenever expression is called for. It is a developing resource. A resource that develops through the specific conditions that genuine development requires. And the most fundamental of those conditions is the condition of genuine uncontested interior space. Of solitude. Of the specific quality of silence, not the absence of external noise necessarily, but the absence of the external world's continuous demand for direction of your attention, that genuine interior development requires. Seneca wrote about this with a directness that cuts through 2,000 years of historical distance with complete contemporary relevance. He wrote, "Retire into yourself as much as possible with those who will make you better. Receive those who can make you better. Admit those whom you can make better. And this process should be mutual, for men learn while they teach." The specific word is retire. Not escape. Not hide. The deliberate, chosen, regularly practiced withdrawal into the interior that genuine self-development requires. The specific choice to make the interior unavailable to the exterior's continuous demand for some portion of every day. He also wrote, "Associate with those who will make you a better person. Welcome those who you can make better. And do this by going back and forth. By turns you will teach and be taught. But in between, retire to yourself." In between. The specific, deliberate, regularly maintained spaces between the genuine engagement with others that constitute genuine social and professional life, the spaces that the too reachable person has systematically eliminated by making the continuous availability that eliminates these spaces the ambient default. Marcus Aurelius practiced this retirement into the interior with a deliberateness that his journals reveal as practically and philosophically foundational to everything else he was doing. He writes about it as a genuine practice, not an ideal he aspired to but a discipline he maintained. The mornings that belonged to the interior before the empire made its demands. The evenings that returned to the interior before the sleep that the interior preparation had enabled. The specific, regularly maintained spaces in the enormous pressure of governing the Roman Empire during a period of war and plague and political complexity, spaces that he created not because the empire's demands ever reached a point of genuine sufficiency that naturally produced them, but because he understood that the alternative was the gradual degradation of the interior resource that the empire's governance most fundamentally required. The interior. The quality of judgment. The depth of wisdom. The genuine insight that the pressure of continuous external demand, unrelieved by the genuine retirement into the interior, would have gradually and systematically depleted. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." But this power, this specific, philosophically fundamental power of the interior over the exterior, is not simply given. It is not automatically present in anyone who knows that it is theoretically available. It is developed through the specific, daily, deliberately maintained practice of actually inhabiting the interior. Of actually directing the attention inward rather than perpetually outward. Of actually giving the interior the specific, uncontested, genuinely present engagement with itself that genuine interior development requires. The too reachable person knows, intellectually, that the interior matters. They would agree, in any conversation about the topic, that genuine interior development is important. They would nod at the Stoic wisdom about the primacy of the interior. And then they would check their messages. Not because they are hypocrites. Because the structural conditions of their lives, the constant reachability, the perpetual availability, the ambient norm that immediate response is responsible response, have made the genuine retirement into the interior practically unavailable without the specific, deliberate, regularly maintained choice to make it available. That choice is what this exploration is about. And why it matters. The specific costs of too much reachability, the complete accounting. The costs of being too reachable are specific, real, and consequential in ways that most people who are paying them have not yet fully seen because the gradual nature of the accumulation prevents the clear view that the complete accounting produces. The cost to the quality of thinking. Genuine thinking, not the processing of incoming information, not the responding to other people's questions, not the managing of the continuous stream of communication that the too reachable person is managing. Genuine thinking requires specific conditions that continuous reachability systematically prevents. It requires sustained attention. The specific, uninterrupted engagement with a question or a problem or a genuine inquiry over a period long enough for the thinking to develop past the surface level that immediate response and continuous interruption consistently maintain it at. Research on the cognitive cost of interruption is unambiguous and sobering. The average person who is interrupted requires approximately 23 minutes to return to the depth of engagement they had achieved before the interruption. Not 23 minutes of recovery time separate from the working time. 23 minutes of the working time itself, consumed in the return to the depth that was present before the interruption occurred. The person who is responding to messages every few minutes is not thinking at the depth they are capable of thinking at. Is not doing the sustained, genuinely productive, genuinely creative work that their intelligence and their experience are actually capable of producing. They are doing the shallow, interrupted, perpetually recovering work of someone whose attention is being continuously redirected before it can reach the depth at which the most genuinely valuable thinking occurs. This is not a small cost. Over the span of a career, over the span of a life, the cumulative difference between the thinking produced in conditions of genuine sustained attention and the thinking produced in conditions of continuous interruption and continuous reachability is the difference between the person who produced something genuinely significant and the person who managed a continuous stream of adequate responses. Diana understood this after the 3 hours of turned-off phone. The specific quality of thinking that had occurred in those 3 hours was different from the quality of thinking that the preceding 11 years of constant reachability had produced. Not because she was smarter. Because the thinking had been allowed to go to a depth that the continuous availability had been consistently preventing. The cost to genuine relationships. This cost is perhaps the most immediately painful when it becomes fully visible. Because the continuous reachability that damages genuine relationships presents itself as the opposite, as the responsiveness and the availability and the demonstrated care for the people in your life that the immediate response represents. But genuine relationship, the specific, deep, mutually enriching quality of connection that constitutes genuine intimacy, is not built through immediate responses to messages. It is built through genuine presence. Through the specific quality of actually being here with the person in front of you. Of directing the full weight of your genuine attention toward them without the continuous competition of the device in your pocket or on the table between you. The person who is too reachable is, paradoxically, not fully reachable to the specific person who is actually present. Their attention is perpetually divided between the person in front of them and the continuous stream of people and demands that the device represents. They are half present to everything and fully present to nothing. And the people in their lives feel this. Not always consciously. In the specific way that genuine presence feels different from divided presence even when the divided presence is accompanied by apparently attentive behavior. In the way that being with someone who is actually here feels different from being with someone who is elsewhere even when their body is in the room. The relationships that are most important, the ones with the people who matter most, the ones where genuine depth and genuine intimacy are genuinely possible, require the specific, protected, uncontested presence that the too reachable person has systematically made unavailable. This is a genuine cost. To the quality of the relationships. To the depth of the intimacy. To the specific experience, available to both people in a genuinely present relationship, of actually being known by someone who is actually here. The cost to genuine creativity. Every genuinely creative person who has examined their own creative process has described some version of the same structural requirement for their best work. The need for extended, uninterrupted, genuinely private engagement with the creative process. The specific quality of the creative work that only occurs when the creator has had sufficient time in the genuinely solitary engagement with the work to reach the depth where the genuinely original and genuinely valuable creative insights live. The too reachable creative person is not producing their best work. Cannot produce it. The conditions for it have been systematically eliminated by the structure of continuous availability that makes the extended, uninterrupted, genuinely private engagement with the creative process unavailable as a regular feature of the creative life. They are producing the work that is possible in the shallow, interrupted, perpetually redirected conditions of the too reachable life. Which is often good work, competent, informed, professionally adequate work. But it is not the work they are actually capable of. Not the work that would be produced in the conditions their best creative engagement actually requires. The painter who is interrupted every 15 minutes. The writer whose sustained narrative engagement is broken every few minutes by the notification that arrives and is answered and restores the expectation of immediate response that the next notification will exploit. The thinker whose genuinely original insight is perpetually deferred because the depth of thinking required to reach it is perpetually interrupted before it can be reached. These people are paying a creative cost that they can feel, in the specific, chronic sense of knowing that the work is not what they know it could be, but that they cannot always name clearly enough to address. The address is the management of access. The deliberate, regularly maintained, philosophically grounded choice to make the sustained creative engagement with the work unavailable to interruption during the specific periods that the sustained creative engagement requires. The cost to genuine wisdom. This is the deepest and least visible cost available in the accounting of too much reachability. And it is the cost that the Stoic philosophical tradition most specifically and most urgently identified. Wisdom, genuine wisdom, the specific quality of understanding that goes beyond knowledge and information and competent professional functioning to the depth of genuine insight about what matters and how to live and who to be and what the specific quality of a genuinely good life actually requires, is not produced through the processing of other people's questions and other people's needs and other people's demands on your attention. It is produced through the sustained, patient, regularly maintained engagement with your own genuine experience of your own genuine life. Through the specific, private, uncontested process of turning your own attention toward the questions that your own life is actually raising. Through the genuinely solitary thinking that produces the genuine insight that genuine wisdom is built from. This process requires time that belongs genuinely to you. Not time that is technically available on your schedule between meetings. Not time that the ambient norm of continuous availability has made technically present but psychologically impossible because the expectation of immediate response means that any attempt to inhabit the time as genuinely yours is undermined by the knowledge that the response is being waited for. Genuinely yours. Protected by the specific, deliberate, regularly Maintain choice to make your attention temporarily unavailable to the external world's continuous demand so that it can be genuinely available to the interior development that the external demand has been competing with. Seneca identified this cost with his characteristic directness: I am not much interested in the person who is always with company, whom none can leave without injury, whom if one would repair, one must tear away. Such is the person who, in the philosopher's phrase, becomes neither their own man nor anyone else's. Neither their own person nor anyone else's. The specific, devastating assessment of what continuous reachability produces at its most complete. The person who is so thoroughly colonized by the external world's continuous demand for their attention that they have become, in the most fundamental sense, no longer genuinely themselves. Their time is not theirs. Their attention is not theirs. Their interior development has been perpetually deferred to the management of the external access that the continuous availability has made universal. And the wisdom that would have been built in the genuinely private, genuinely uncontested space that the genuine interior development requires has not been built. Because the space was never genuinely available. Why continuous reachability has become the default, and why changing it is harder than it sounds. Understanding why continuous reachability has become so pervasive and so normalized is necessary for understanding why changing it requires the specific, deliberate, philosophically grounded approach rather than the simple decision to check your phone less often. The ambient cultural norm of immediate response has been built by the specific, cumulative effect of several powerful forces operating simultaneously. The first is the genuine utility of connectivity. The smartphone and the communication technologies it enables are genuinely useful. The ability to coordinate quickly, to share information immediately, to maintain connection with people across distance, these capabilities have genuine value. The norm of continuous reachability did not emerge from something entirely without value. It emerged from the genuine utility of connectivity being extended, gradually and without deliberate examination, from the specific valuable contexts where it is genuinely useful to the entirety of waking life where its continuous presence has specific costs that its genuine utility does not justify. The second is the social reinforcement of immediate response. The person who responds immediately is perceived, in many professional and social contexts, as more responsible, more committed, more engaged than the person who responds with any delay. This perception is not entirely groundless. Immediate response does communicate something about prioritization. But the communication is ambiguous at best and misleading at worst. The person who responds immediately may be communicating prioritization, or may be communicating the absence of the sustained engagement with genuinely important work that immediate response consistently prevents. The social reinforcement of immediate response has not been careful about this distinction. The third is the anxiety reduction that immediate response provides. There is a specific, immediate, physiologically real relief that arrives when the pending message is answered. The specific tension of the unanswered message, the message in the inbox that you know is there and that you know requires a response and that exists in your interior as a low-level but persistent source of incompleteness, is resolved by the response. And the resolution feels good in the specific way that anxiety reduction feels good. Immediately and genuinely. But this anxiety reduction is a trap of the most effective kind. Because it provides an immediate reward for the behavior, the immediate response, that perpetuates the condition that creates the anxiety. The more quickly you respond, the more the expectation of quick response is established. The more the expectation of quick response is established, the more the anxiety of the pending unanswered message is amplified. The more the anxiety of the pending unanswered message is amplified, the more powerful the drive toward the immediate response that relieves it. This is the specific, self-reinforcing cycle of continuous reachability. The anxiety drives the immediate response. The immediate response establishes the expectation. The established expectation amplifies the anxiety of any departure from it. And the amplified anxiety drives the next immediate response. Breaking this cycle is not as simple as the decision to check your phone less often. Because the cycle is physiologically driven, by the genuine anxiety of the pending message and the genuine relief of the response, in a way that makes the decision, without the specific practices and the specific philosophical grounding that give it force, consistently insufficient in the face of the physiological pull. The Stoics understood this kind of challenge. They understood that the management of the desires and the impulses and the ambient pressures that continuously competed with genuine philosophical living required not just the single decision but the specific, daily, philosophically grounded practice that maintained the decision against the continuous pressure. This is what the specific practices we are about to explore are for. The specific practices of reclaiming genuine interior space, what they look like and how they work. The practice of designated unreachable time. The foundation of everything else is the specific, daily, protected designation of time during which you are genuinely unavailable to the external world's access. Not technically unavailable because you happen to be in a meeting. Genuinely unavailable by deliberate, principled choice. The specific structure of this time will vary. For some people it is the mornings, the specific hours before the external world's demands begin that belong entirely to the genuine interior engagement that the day requires but that continuous reachability prevents. For others it is a specific period during the day, a protected block of several hours during which the devices are placed out of reach and the attention is given entirely to the sustained engagement with genuinely important work. For others it is the evenings, the specific period after the workday's formal demands have ended and before the sleep that the uncontested interior engagement has enabled. What matters is not the specific structure. It is the genuine designation. The specific, deliberately maintained, regularly renewed choice to make these hours genuinely unavailable to the external world's access. Not technically difficult to interrupt but genuinely, principally, deliberately protected from interruption. Marcus Aurelius protected his mornings. The specific hours before the empire made its demands were hours he used for the interior engagement that the empire's governance ultimately required. Not selfishly, the mornings produced the quality of thinking and the quality of judgment that the empire's welfare depended on. But deliberately. With the specific understanding that the alternative, making the mornings available to the empire's demands as immediately as the rest of the day, would have gradually and systematically depleted the interior resource that the empire was depending on. You do not govern an empire. But the principle applies at every scale. The interior resource that your most genuinely important work depends on, the quality of thinking, the depth of judgment, the genuine insight that your life and your relationships and your creative and professional contributions require, this resource is developed in the unreachable time. Not in the continuously available time. In the time that belongs genuinely to the interior. Designate it. Protect it. Maintain it against the continuous pressure of the ambient norm that treats all time as available time. The practice of genuine device boundaries. The too-reachable person has typically established no genuine structural boundaries between the device and the experiences that the device consistently compromises. The device is present at the meal. At the conversation. At the walk. At the evening. At the morning. In the bedroom. In the bathroom. In every space that the ambient norm of continuous availability has colonized. Genuine device boundaries are not the performance of health. They are the specific, structural choice to create the physical conditions that the genuine experiences, the genuine conversations, the genuine meals, the genuine engagement with the people and the moments that are actually present, require. The device has no place in the specific experiences where its presence most consistently damages what it claims not to be damaging. At the meal with the people who matter. In the conversation where genuine presence is what the other person most needs and most deserves. In the hour before sleep that the device's specific light and stimulation is most specifically disrupting. In the morning hour before the day's demands arrive that the device most specifically colonizes before the interior has had the space it needs. These boundaries are not always comfortable. The specific anxiety of the unmonitored device, the knowledge that messages are arriving and not being addressed, is real and physiologically present in a way that the decision not to check does not automatically eliminate. The Stoic practice addresses this anxiety directly. By applying the fear audit to the specific anxiety of the unmonitored message. What is the actual worst case of not responding to this message for 2 hours? For the vast majority of messages from the vast majority of people in the vast majority of contexts, the actual worst case is, they wait for 2 hours for a response. That is the actual worst case. Not the catastrophic outcome that the anxiety suggests. The 2-hour wait. And the 2-hour wait, examined honestly rather than through the anxiety's amplification of it, is a consequence that the genuine value of the protected interior space more than justifies. The practice of deliberate communication design. The too-reachable person has typically allowed the communication expectations in their professional and personal life to develop by default. The implicit norm of immediate response was established not through deliberate agreement but through the gradual accumulation of immediate responses that produced the expectation of immediate response that subsequent immediate responses confirmed. This implicit norm can be deliberately redesigned. Not through the dramatic announcement of new policies or the confrontational assertion of boundaries that the ambient norm experiences as hostility. Through the specific, deliberate, gradual communication of a different expectation. The deliberate communication design begins with the honest assessment of which relationships and which communication contexts genuinely require the immediate response and which do not. The genuine emergency, the genuinely urgent situation where delay in response would produce a genuinely significant cost, is real. But the genuine emergency is rare. Far rarer than the ambient norm of continuous availability implies by treating all incoming communication with the same structural urgency. Most incoming communication is not genuinely urgent. Does not require a response within minutes. Could be addressed within hours or within days without the cost that the ambient norm structure implies it would produce. And the deliberate communication design establishes this honestly, through the consistent pattern of thoughtful responses that are not immediate but that are genuinely present and genuinely considered when they arrive, in a way that gradually recalibrates the expectation without the confrontation that explicit announcement would produce. Diana practiced this. After the Wednesday afternoon. Not through announcement. Through the consistent, deliberate pattern of responses that were not immediate but that were more genuinely considered than the immediate ones had been. Through the consistent communication, in the responses themselves, of the specific quality of genuine thought that the non-immediate response had made possible. The people who had learned to expect immediate responses adjusted. Not all of them immediately. Not all of them without some friction during the adjustment period. But genuinely. Because the quality of the considered response more than compensated for the delay that produced it. The practice of single-focus engagement. One of the specific disciplines that the Stoics consistently identified as foundational to genuine interior development is the practice of being completely where you are. Of giving the full weight of your genuine attention to the specific thing that is genuinely in front of you without the divided, partial, perpetually interrupted attention that continuous reachability produces. The practical form of this practice is the specific, daily, deliberately maintained discipline of single-focus engagement. The meal that is the meal, experienced with the full sensory attention that the meal actually deserves, without the device that converts the meal into the background for the management of the communication stream. The conversation that is the conversation, with the full, genuine, actually receiving attention that the person speaking deserves, without the divided attention that the device in the pocket represents even when it is not being actively consulted. The walk that is the walk, with the specific, genuinely present engagement with the physical experience of moving through the world, without the earphones and the content stream that converts the walk into a consumption experience rather than a genuinely present one. These single-focus engagements are not productivity optimizations. They are the specific, daily practice of genuinely inhabiting the life that is actually being lived. Of being actually present to the specific experiences that constitute the actual life rather than perpetually elsewhere in the management of the access that continuous reachability maintains. And they produce, over time, a genuinely different quality of life. Not because the experiences themselves are dramatically different. Because the relationship to the experiences is genuinely present rather than perpetually divided. And the difference between the genuinely present experience and the divided one is the difference that the Stoics identified as the difference between the genuine life and the performance of it. The practice of philosophical grounding for the boundaries. Every genuine boundary requires a genuine justification, a specific, philosophically grounded understanding of why the boundary is worth maintaining against the continuous pressure of the ambient norm that treats it as unnecessary or selfish or professionally irresponsible. The philosophical grounding that the Stoic tradition provides for the practice of deliberate unreachability is among the most powerful available. Because it locates the practice not in the specific optimization of productivity or the specific preservation of personal time but in the most fundamental philosophical question available: what is actually yours? What is genuinely under your governance? And what has been allowed to occupy that space that has no genuine right to it? Your attention is yours. The most fundamental resource of your interior life. The specific capacity that determines the quality of your thinking, your relationships, your creative and professional work, your wisdom, your genuine development as the specific human being you are capable of becoming. The external world's demand for that attention is not yours. It is theirs. And the ambient norm that has established the continuous availability of your attention to their demand has not established something that is genuinely owed. It has established an expectation. An expectation that was produced by your accommodation of it and that can be genuinely revised by the deliberate withdrawal of that accommodation. This philosophical grounding, the specific, Stoic recognition that your attention is genuinely yours and that the external world's claim on it is a request to which genuine choice can be applied rather than an obligation that genuine responsibility requires you to meet continuously, is the interior foundation from which the practices can be genuinely maintained against the continuous pressure of the ambient norm. Without this grounding, the practices feel like selfishness. Feel like the irresponsible withdrawal from the genuine obligations that the people in your life genuinely have a right to expect you to meet. Feel like the luxury of someone who can afford to be unavailable rather than the genuine philosophical practice of someone who understands what is actually theirs. With this grounding, the practices feel like what they actually are. The responsible, mature, philosophically serious management of the most important resource you have. The deliberate, principled protection of the interior space that the people and the purposes you care most about genuinely depend on you to protect. The specific choice to be genuinely present to the things that deserve genuine presence rather than partially present to everything and fully present to nothing. The practice of graduated reduction. The too reachable person who attempts to immediately achieve the ideal of genuine deliberate unreachability will almost certainly fail. Because the physiological pull of the ambient norm, the anxiety of the pending message, the relief of the immediate response, the social reinforcement of the immediate availability, is real and powerful and does not yield to a single decision however philosophically grounded. The graduated reduction is the specific practice of incrementally, deliberately, consistently expanding the space of genuine unavailability. The first week, 30 minutes of turned-off phone in the morning before the day begins. The second week, an hour. The third week, the phone in another room during meals. The gradual, patient, consistently maintained expansion of the space that belongs genuinely to the interior. This graduation does two things. It allows the anxiety response to the unavailability to be encountered and processed in manageable doses rather than overwhelming doses. And it provides the specific, accumulating evidence that the feared consequences of the unavailability, the catastrophic outcomes that the anxiety suggests will result from not responding immediately, do not materialize in the form or with the magnitude that the anxiety projects. The evidence accumulates. The anxiety reduces. Not to zero, but to a level that the philosophical grounding can genuinely govern. And the space expands. Gradually, genuinely, sustainably. Diana's 3 hours did not become 11 hours immediately. They became 3 hours regularly. Then 4. Then the specific structure that her life's genuine requirements, honestly assessed and deliberately designed, actually warranted rather than the structure that the ambient norm's continuous pressure had been producing. The practice of genuine solitude. The ultimate practice, the one that all of the preceding practices are oriented toward making possible, is the practice of genuine solitude. The specific, regularly maintained engagement with the interior in the complete absence of external demand on your attention. Not the solitude of isolation. Not the withdrawal from genuine human engagement. The specific, deliberately protected periods of genuine interior engagement that are unavailable to interruption, not because no one is present but because the choice to be present to the interior rather than to the exterior has been genuinely and deliberately made. Seneca wrote about this practice with the specific urgency of someone who understood it as foundational to everything else. He wrote, "Retire to yourself as much as possible. Have as your company those who can make you better. Invite those whom you can make better. And this exchange should be mutual. Human beings teach and learn at the same time. But above all, withdraw from those who would diminish your spirit." And then he added the specific instruction that gives the preceding counsel its genuine substance: withdraw, but not so far that you cannot return, and not so far that you become divorced from those among whom you live. This is the precise calibration. Not the withdrawal from genuine human life. The deliberate, regularly maintained, philosophically serious withdrawal from the external world's continuous claim on your attention. The specific creation of the interior space that genuine self-development requires. And then the return, genuinely enriched by the withdrawal, genuinely more present because of the practiced interior engagement, to the genuine human relationships and the genuine professional and creative work that the withdrawal was specifically enabling. This is the genuine practice of deliberate unreachability at its most complete. Not the performance of unavailability. The genuine, principled, regularly maintained cultivation of the interior space that the person you are capable of being requires to actually become that person. What becomes available when you stop being too reachable? The genuine transformation. Diana spent the 6 months after the Wednesday afternoon gradually, deliberately, philosophically seriously implementing the practices we have been describing. Not perfectly. Not without the friction that any genuine departure from an ambient norm produces. Not without the specific anxiety of the pending message and the specific social discomfort of the recalibrated expectation. But genuinely. With the specific, philosophically grounded understanding of why the practices mattered and what they were building. 6 months later, she wrote about what had become available in the space that the practices had created. The quality of her thinking had changed. Not because she was smarter. Because the thinking was happening at a depth that the continuous interruption had been preventing. The sustained engagement with genuinely important questions, the questions that her work and her life were actually raising, was producing insights that the shallow, interrupted, perpetually redirected attention of 11 years of continuous reachability had never produced. The quality of her relationships had changed. The people she loved were receiving a quality of presence from her that she had not known she had been withholding until the practice of genuine presence revealed what the divided attention had been denying them. The conversations were genuinely different. More real. More connecting. More accurately what both people were actually communicating rather than what the surface of the words suggested. The quality of her creative work had changed. The sustained engagement with the creative process that the protected, uninterrupted hours were enabling was producing work that she recognized as genuinely different from the work the previous conditions had produced. Not dramatically different in obvious external ways. But genuinely different in the specific, interior way that the creator knows when the work has reached the depth that their actual capacity is capable of producing. And the quality of her own interior experience had changed. The specific sense of herself, of actually being present to her own genuine life, inhabiting her own actual experience, directing her own actual attention toward what was genuinely hers rather than perpetually outward toward the external world's continuous demand, was different from the specific quality of the 11 years of continuous reachability that the 3 hours on a Wednesday afternoon had made visible by contrast. She was present. Genuinely. To herself. To the specific, unrepeatable, completely real moments of her actual life. With the specific quality of genuine inhabiting that only the reclaimed interior space makes possible. This is what stops being too reachable produces. Not productivity optimization. Not professional performance enhancement. The genuine presence to your own genuine life that the continuous availability has been specifically preventing. The interior that is genuinely yours. The attention that is genuinely directed by you rather than perpetually captured by whoever knows how to produce a notification in your pocket. The thinking that reaches the depth your intelligence is actually capable of. The relationships that receive the presence they actually deserve. The creative and professional work that reflects what you are actually capable of rather than what is possible in the shallow, interrupted, perpetually redirected conditions of the too-reachable life. The wisdom that develops in the protected space. The genuine self that inhabits the deliberate interior rather than perpetually managing the external's access. This is available. Not through a single dramatic withdrawal from the ambient norm. Through the specific, daily, consistently maintained, philosophically grounded practices of deliberately, principally, genuinely reclaiming the interior space that the too-reachable life has colonized. Starting with the simplest and most immediately available practice. The device placed face down. The screen going dark. The specific quality of silence that follows. And the genuine, unmediated, completely yours interior that the silence reveals. Sit with it. You have been away from it for a long time. It has been waiting for you. Subscribe to Stoic Ascension right now. Turn on your notifications. Every single video on this channel is built for exactly this depth of philosophical understanding and this quality of practically applicable engagement. The kind that names what most people are experiencing without knowing what to name it, and that provides the specific philosophical grounding and the specific daily practices that genuinely address what is being named. What comes after this builds directly on everything you just heard. Every video goes deeper. Every video takes the practice further into the complete work of genuinely inhabiting the life that is genuinely available to you when the external world's continuous demand for your attention is genuinely and deliberately addressed. Diana turned off her phone for the first time in 11 years. She placed it face down on the kitchen table. She watched the screen go dark. She sat with the silence. For 3 hours. And discovered what the 11 years of continuous noise had been covering. Herself. Genuinely present. To herself. For the first time in 11 years. You do not have to wait 11 years to discover this. The practice begins the next time the device is in your hand and the specific, deliberate, philosophically grounded choice to put it down is genuinely available. Make that choice. Now.